Count on LEX-18 News.
We haven't seen any servant leadership from the folks we've had elected for far too long.
In short, my opponent likes to talk, but I get results.
After months, weeks, countless hours of campaigning, it all comes down to this. Kentuckians join the rest of the nation in an election that will go down in history.
The people of Kentucky had a clear choice, and they sent a clear message.
I want to start by thanking you all for supporting me throughout this campaign.
And some candidates celebrate and others call it quits. Some are hanging on for an outcome in what could be a long and eventful wait. LEX-18 News at 11 starts now.
This is LEX-18 News, election night coverage of Decision 2020.
Good evening and thanks for staying up with us at 11. I'm Davidson.
And I'm Nancy Cox. Right now, we begin with the race that everyone is watching, the race for president.
Of course, you are now looking at a live electoral college map. As you can see, the electoral college is starting to balance out and get a little bit narrower margin between Biden and Trump, although the former vice president is ahead by 4. And of course, when we look at the Senate, they're also saying that that is just a differential of 1 between Republicans and Democrats, with the Republicans holding on only by 1. And the House of Representatives is going to stay under Democratic control, with Nancy Pelosi saying that she would like to have another term as the Speaker of the House.
As Americans flock to the polls on this final day of voting in the 2020 election, Democrat Joe Biden had a homecoming in Scranton, Pennsylvania, before heading off to events across that crucial battleground state.
And President Trump traveled to Virginia to thank campaign workers there, both bracing for a long night and the possibility that the winner may not be known for several days. But here in Kentucky, President Trump did pick up the 8 electoral votes. Kentucky was called for the president not long after the polls closed. Alice Barr is at the White House with the latest.
Tonight, President Trump and challenger Joe Biden coloring in the electoral map, nailing down the states that make up their base and beginning the wait for results from the remaining battlegrounds. In early projections, the president laying claim to Indiana, Kentucky, Tennessee, and Oklahoma. Biden on top in New York, New Jersey, Maryland, and his home state of Delaware. Snapshots on this election day. Houston area voters arriving on horseback. In Spalding County, Georgia, election machines crashed.
They said that the machines was down and they had paper ballots, but then they ran out of paper ballots.
And in closely watched Pennsylvania, voters packed an elementary school polling place outside of Philadelphia. Biden wrapped up his campaign a short distance away with a simple appeal.
We have to restore decency and honor in our system, or it's going to fall apart.
The former vice president began his day with a visit to church and the gravesite of his son, Beau. President Trump thanking campaign staff at his headquarters in Virginia.
Everybody should come together, and I think success brings us together. We're going to have a tremendous success.
Voters anxious for a resolution.
I think it's been really stressful for me, for everybody. I hope that we kind of transition to a better point moving forward.
Election officials urging patience, calm, and faith that every vote will count. In Washington, Alice Barr, NBC News.
Well, Senator Mitch McConnell won a 7th term with 58% of the vote against his Democratic challenger, retired firefighter pilot Amy McGrath.
McConnell said this win cemented the fact that Kentuckians want to keep a front row seat in the Senate. Karolina Buczek has more on the senator's victory.
Well, this election night started off different for Senator Mitch McConnell in this room. No real campaign watch party. There were no supporters here, just reporters and cameras tonight for McConnell. But at the end of the night, he pulled out another win. So this turned out to be a similar result to what he has experienced in the past. In his short victory speech, McConnell expressed gratitude. He thanked Kentuckians for giving him another 6 years in the Senate.
I never imagined Kentuckians would make me the longest-serving senator in our state's history, or that my fellow Senate Republicans would make me the longest-serving Republican leader in U.S. Senate history.
And with his victory tonight, Amy McGrath becomes the 7th opponent McConnell has defeated.
My opponent ran a spirited race. She stood up for her views and won a lot of votes. I applaud her willingness to step forward.
Ultimately, McConnell said Kentuckians gave him this victory because of his leadership. This is something he heavily campaigned on, telling people that his influence allows Kentucky to punch above its weight, and he believes that carried him to victory. So we know that Senator McConnell is heading back to Washington for another 6 years, but there's still the question of his role as Senate Majority Leader. We don't know if he will be able to keep that role, and that, of course, depends on what happens across the country. Coming into tonight, McConnell said he knows the odds of that happening are 50-50, so we're still waiting on those results from across the country. In Louisville, Karolina, Buczek, LEX-TV News.
Out of precaution due to the pandemic, Amy McGrath did not hold an election night gathering tonight, so we have not seen her since she left the airport earlier today from Scott County. But even though this was an unconventional election night here for Kentucky, it ended the same for Democrats as it has since 1984 against Mitch McConnell, with a loss. The retired Marine McGrath spent her election day up in the air, flying across the state to visit supporters before finally landing back in central Kentucky just after 5:30 as the sun set. Friends, family, and some fans greeted her at the Georgetown Scott County Airport. Still hopeful for her chances at that time, even though McGrath trailed in most polls since the matchup with McConnell was set back in June. She told Kentuckians they could do better than Mitch McConnell, that after 36 years, he did not use his standing in the Senate to help them, even failing to get more COVID-19 relief passed. As she spoke to reporters right after the polls closed, I asked her what she learned about Kentuckians during her campaign.
They love our country, and they know that here in 2020, for a lot of people, voting matters, of course, but for many people, they got to do more than just vote. They got to be a part of this team. They got to encourage other people to vote. So I think that's what I've learned, and it's been really encouraging.
With McGrath's loss tonight, the last U.S. Senator from Kentucky to be a Democrat is still Wendell Ford, and he retired in the late 90s. And now for more on the 6th District congressional race, let's send it over to Mike Valente.
Yeah, Conroy, another decisive victory for Republicans here in Kentucky, this one in the 6th District. Andy Barr retaining his 5th term in the House of Representatives, first elected in 2012 when he beat then incumbent Ben Chandler. 2 years ago, you'll remember, the race was a toss-up. He eked out a victory by just 3 percentage points against then congressional candidate Amy McGrath. This time around, much more decisive a victory, won by 18%. That's with 95% of precincts reporting. He says this clear victory is reflective of how he believes constituents have trusted him with serving them during the pandemic. He has voted to secure PPE for local hospitals. He voted for forgivable loans for small businesses. He said also his role on the China task force, that's an ongoing investigation into China's role, if any, in concealing potential information about the virus. He says all of those things he believes gave confidence to voters to send him back to Congress. He says going forward, he needs to work on a stimulus package with his colleagues, and he also wants to continue his work on the Financial Services Committee. I just want to note, he talked about how this was a bittersweet night. Of course, the Barr family's had a trying year. They lost his wife, Carol, earlier this year due to a heart condition. He says he wants to work on heart disease going forward in Congress. We're live in Lexington. Mike Valente, LEX-18 News.
All right, Mike, thank you. As part of our election coverage, LEX-18 was granted an all-access pass to a day in the life of Kentucky's Secretary of State.
Michael Berk is live in Frankfort with a look at Secretary Michael Adams Day as we continue our election 2020 coverage.
Well, as you might imagine, it's been a whirlwind day for Secretary Michael Adams. It's still going on. He's actually still in his office downstairs. It started early this morning, about 5 a.m. with a stop in Louisville, and then he made his way east here to Lexington as well, where he visited a couple of polling locations. Also sat in on a meeting with the State Board of Elections during the 1 o'clock hour today as the results were coming in. Adams, much to the chagrin of many in the Republican Party, devised an election plan he felt best served Kentucky voters in the middle of this pandemic. He treasures the voting process and felt no one should be left on the outside looking in on this democratic process.
I wasn't surprised at the backlash in the primary because what we were doing was totally new, but we showed that we could pull it off. We showed that we could do it without vote fraud. And so I really hope that I get more benefit of the doubt for the general election. but I didn't. It was really hard, not having the support of my party more, but I think they've come on board. They've realized that we've got a good system, that it keeps people safe, but also gets people to vote.
Secretary Adams also told us that a record of more than 2 million Kentucky voters cast a vote in this election. Governor Beshear later tweeted about that record. It shows that what can be accomplished when you work together and cross party lines to do so. The governor also tweeted that he'd like to see at least some variation, some version of this plan become state law at some point. We'll see what happens with that. Live in Frankfurt, I'm Michael Berk, LEX 18 News. Back to you in the studio.
Michael, thanks for your work today.
Yes.
Voting this election day was different than it's ever been before, with limited polling locations and coming on the heels of extensive early voting options.
So for the latest, let's head out to LEX 18's Angie Beavin. She joins us now from one of the city's polling locations to continue our Decision 2020 coverage.
It is all quiet out here now. The lights are off. This place is empty, of course. It's been a few hours since polls closed. Now, earlier this evening and throughout the day today, there was certainly a steady stream of people that were coming here and lining up to vote. The Lexington Senior Center is just one of 8 polling locations we had in Lexington today. Take a look. This is the line outside earlier tonight. It stretched far beyond the entrance to the Lexington Senior Center. A 12-hour election day concluded an unprecedented election following weeks of early in-person voting and mail-in voting. County Clerk Don Blevins expected around 10,000 voters to turn out on Election Day in Lexington today. This polling location, again one of 8 in the city, had 1,481 ballots cast today.
This will be one of the most important elections of our lifetime, so I want to do it for not only for my family, but also for the generations to come. So I thought it was important to be out here today.
It just seemed like there was a major decision to be made, and it just felt very important to me because there's so much hanging on this.
And of course, polls closed at 6 o'clock. There was still a pretty long line here at that time. The last person in line at the cutoff there cast his ballot right at 7 o'clock. In Lexington, I'm Angie Beavin, LEX 18 News.
In this election, Fayette County voters spoke volumes about how they prefer to cast their ballots.
They sure did. LEX 18's Leigh Searcy has that story.
In Fayette County, every vote ends up here in the Fayette County Clerk's Office election night. This year, 155,000 votes went through this computer. More than 90,000 of them by absentee. By the numbers, it's clear people overwhelmingly chose early voting. But County Clerk Don Blevins says if the legislature passes it in the future, clerks like himself will need help, lots of it.
We had to do a vote by mail election. We had to do an early voting election, and then of course the traditional election day. We could only really do 2, maybe 1 of those 3, and we even asked them to only make us do 1. This was very difficult.
Wellington Elementary.
By Fayette County's results, elections may very well change. Again, of Fayette County's 155,000 total votes, only 9,700 people cast their ballots on Election Day. In Lexington, Leigh Searcy, LEX 18 News.
Still ahead, we talk to LEX 18's political analyst Bob Babbage about tonight's Kentucky race results.
But first, a look at your storm tracker forecast with Chief Meteorologist Bill Meck. Did you know you were coming? Get to work.
For Kentucky, Election Day is over. Here's how we cast our weather ballot. Sunshine, warm, dry, all winners, and looks like we're going to keep that kind of forecast for a while. So sit back and enjoy. Tomorrow the sun will rise again and the weather will be great. It's going to be a terrific day. This week we'll call it mild and dry. Temperatures running 5 to almost 10 degrees above normal. That's mild. For the weekend, how about warm and dry? Temperatures more than 10 above normal as we're heading into the 70s. And even now, when we get temperatures that are in the 60s, all of a sudden that feels warm. So enjoy. As you look around here from the Kentucky Mesonet, kymesonet.org, pick out your favorite town. We've got some warmth west of I-75. Look at Danville still at 51. Lawrenceburg's at 47. Frankfort's at 44. You get to London and Corbin, 41. But eastern Kentucky, we see some 30s showing up again. 36 coming out of Jackson, 37 in Booneville, 39 in Owingsville. Lexington right now, it's not bad. 48. South wind at 7. High today was 61. High tomorrow will be better than that. As you look around the bluegrass, 70 in Lawrenceburg, 71 in Frankfort, 70 in Richmond. Lexington, a lot of places will be upper 60s to right around 70. Heading out to eastern Kentucky, Irvin and Stanton should make the low 70s. West Liberty 67, Owensville comes in at 66. As you go to the southeastern part of Kentucky, along the Parkway, upper 60s to around 70. You've got 69 in Barberville, same in Beattyville, Jackson, Salyersville, Prestonsburg. And finally, we head over into the Lakes region where Monticello, Somerset, Williamsburg, and Liberty all looking at that 70-degree mark. Throw Jamestown in there too. What's going on is high pressure is just drifting, and it's a big, huge high. There's not much weather going on nationally. Big story, trough, which turns into a little mini cool front, brings some clouds with it, and that'll be on Thursday, but really nothing else. How do temperatures react? Watch this. Watch the above normal temperatures. Keep in mind, normal high is 60 Friday into the weekend. Temperatures running 15, pushing 20 degrees above normal next week. Now, cold's building. It's not going away. November will win eventually, but at least until the middle of next week, warmth is in our future. Boy, this is a big storm. Hurricane Eta still came ashore as a Category 4 storm. It's now down into the Category 2 realm. Its pressures are rising rapidly as it sits over Nicaragua, but bringing horrific rainfall amounts to Nicaragua as well as Honduras. And on the computer modeling, I've been doing this now for better than 3 decades. I've never seen this in a computer model. So there was what was Eta. Watch it reemerge over the Caribbean and the Gulf of Mexico, come across Cuba, into the Gulf again, then swings back over Florida twice. If that happens, and it's a big if, I mean, that is something that is really amazing. If nothing else, it's just fun to look at tonight. Temperatures tonight drop down to the upper 30s with that clear sky. Sunshine tomorrow, pushing 70 in a lot of places. Upper 60s Thursday and Friday, a lot of sunshine. The weekend, how about temperatures in the 70s?
We'll take it.
This is LEX 18 News, election night coverage of Decision 2020.
Real quickly, want to give an update on the Electoral College Board. 192 for former Vice President Joe Biden to President Trump's 114. So that's a 78 Electoral College vote differential to get you to 270. We are covering Decision 2020 here, and we're joined now by LEX 18 political analyst Bob Babbage.
We'll start off with the obvious, Bob. We would all like for this to be over sooner rather than later, but how long do you predict it might take before we have a winner in the presidential race?
We might have some indications tonight for sure about where things are headed, but we're going to narrow down that list of states to count, have only a handful, wait them out. Was it Jimmy Kimmel who said it's kind of like being awake for your own surgery? The body politic has taken a lot of slams this year for a whole lot of reasons, and especially during the political season. But you bring all this back to Kentucky and look at the Trump margin here. You look at the voter registration trend that's 50-1 over the last 12 years, Republican to Democrat in the state. We're a brighter red state. We've been moving red, brighter red tonight. The question on America is red or blue. And we simply do not know that. Living with uncertainty is a problematic thing for a lot of folks in news or in analysis or lobbying or other decision-making processes. We have to wait for a decision. The people have spoken and we just don't know how. Left or right, red or blue, we'll find out.
Well, here in the state, Bob, you mentioned it earlier, we have now an overwhelmingly Republican state legislature, Democratic governor. What does this mean for us for the next couple of years? More gridlock on the big issues of teacher pension potential reform, other budget issues, the economy, trying to bring jobs back. What's it going to take to have progress here in Kentucky now?
Well, there's some work to be done. The legislature can make its decisions. If the governor doesn't agree and vetoes, the veto-proof legislature just became far more veto-proof. With those numbers and with the dynamics and with the political mood of the state, as well as the mood overall dealing with the pandemic and other crises, it's going to be a tough time. The legislature and the governor have to produce a budget, and that comes up for a year period. Then they come back about this time next year into a 2-year budget. We'll be talking, the old expression is the election's about the next election. As soon as this one settles, especially for the state, the 19 or 20 Republicans who are new to the legislature will spark a conversation about what happens in a couple of years for new races in 2022 and the governor's race in 23. A lot of dynamics at work, a tough situation for Governor Beshear tonight and going forward, how he figures out the ways to make this work. Still a powerful governor, a lot to do from his side, but the legislature has newer and greater control as of this evening.
2020 keeps rolling on. Political analyst Bob Babbage, thank you so very much for your insight. There's more LEX-18 news after the break.
Welcome back. Now to the latest on the coronavirus in Kentucky. Cases of COVID-19 continue to climb. Today, Governor Beshear announced 1,795 new cases of the virus, and 11 more Kentuckians have died. The state's positivity rate is 6.24%.
Well, Governor Beshear says he knows people are focused on election results today, but COVID-19, he says, is still a big concern in the Commonwealth. He says he believes there is community spread across our state. Reiterating the call to mask up, he reports a rise in the number of Kentuckians in the ICU at 279 as of 4 o'clock at his briefing. It's because of coronavirus. Kentuckians were given expanded options to vote in this election, and the governor says they should be made permanent. Republican Secretary of State Michael Adams has also called on some expanded voting options to be made permanent, but that's up to the state legislature. We'll be right back.
Thanks for watching. Good night.